Hey, everybody, and welcome back. If you are just tuning in to the news today, maybe you just got up or you've been tied up and haven't kept an eye on what's happening this morning. There was a Governor Ivey press conference just about an hour ago. So me and Mike are going to recap that for you. I'll give y'all a second, everybody get on and get settled. But I'll go ahead and say, if you have any questions, please let Mike and I know in the comments. I will be watching while we talk, and we will make sure that we get your questions answered. But again, while y'all are logging on here, the governor held a press conference at 10 a.m., and that was in Montgomery. And she announced that the current amended Safer at Home order is set to expire on Friday. And we knew that, was coming. And the governor today basically just extended that order through July the 31st. So that's another month of basically what everybody's been doing and what we've been ordered to do, rather. So that was the main news out of that press conference this morning. Now, the governor was joined by State Health Officer Dr. Scott Harris, by Representative Dexter Grimsley, and Greenville Mayor Dexter McClendon. Now, both the Greenville Mayor and the representative were there to talk about personal experiences they have had with COVID and family members that they have had that have either been treated and recovered, or in Representative Dexter Grimsley's case, his sister actually died of COVID earlier this year. So both of them were there to talk about their personal experiences with the virus. And this, again, most everything that we know of this order has stayed the same, but I'm going to start going through your questions. I'll go ahead and let Mike recap what happened at this press conference. Mike, thanks for joining us. And just tell us a little bit about what happened at this 30 to 40 minutes press conference.
Well, this was mostly an opportunity for, first of all, for the governor and Dr. Harris to announce they're extending the Safer at Home order for 4 weeks, but also just to try to plead with people and stress the importance of wearing masks and doing all the safeguards that people have been talking about for months, which apparently compliance with that is still not good enough. And then, as you mentioned, to back up those points, they had Representative Dexter Grimsley, whose sister died of COVID, and the Mayor Dexter McClendon of Greenville, who had COVID, and apparently not a bad case. His wife had a more severe case, and his mother, 90-year-old mother, who's in a nursing home, had COVID and recovered, which is a great story. But they were both very effective, I thought, at reemphasizing the points of Dr. Harris and the governor to start to take this seriously. And I think most people do take it seriously, but apparently that's not as widespread as it needs to be.
And something too that, like I said, for those of y'all just joining us, I'm trying to get my notes here. The order was extended through July 31st. Like Mike said, that's another 4 weeks, and that is July 31st at 5 p.m. And there were a lot of people who were commenting. I saw on that video that Mike actually live streamed for us, that press conference. People were saying, is she going to implement a statewide mask ordinance? And the answer to that is no. That did not happen today. The governor did not implement a statewide mask ordinance. She did say, and I wrote the quote, she said, quote, "For goodness sake, wear a mask." So she very strongly encouraged mask wearing along with Dr. Scott Harris. And she even made a comment saying, quote, "We shouldn't have to order this." And those were very strong words from the governor about wearing masks, the strongest we've heard from her regarding masks yet. But again, that was not made a state order. And she said that this was not going to be a statewide order because she said it would be nearly impossible to enforce that order statewide. So while she and Dr. Scott Harris did very strongly encourage the mask wearing, she did not make it a rule exactly. Now, if you live in Jefferson County, you are under a mask ordinance. We've heard other cities that are considering mask ordinances. Right now, that is Birmingham, which is located in Jefferson County, Montgomery, and Selma. But I've heard a lot of other areas around the state looking at the mask ordinance, but currently, and as of today, there is not one statewide. I want to go ahead and reiterate that because we've got a lot of people talking about questions and or commenting and saying, did that happen? Mike, what else did she say about why that would be so hard to enforce?
Well, what I heard her say was that people are not doing what we tell them to now, and so she didn't really see the point in stepping that up to a requirement. If I understood her right, her point was that people have been told this enough, and they need to do it. And as you said, it's probably wouldn't be practical to try to enforce it as a requirement.
And we should note, too, that the Greenville mayor, Dexter McClendon, he made a comment about how he is for limited government. He is not for a large-scale government. But he did say that he really supports wearing masks. He did not go as far as to say he would support an ordinance or anything like that. But he said, I don't like big government, and I definitely want you to wear a mask. And that was something also that Representative Dexter Grimsley repeated as well. He said, if my sister was alive today, let's remember his 58-year-old sister died a few months ago to coronavirus. He said, if my sister was alive today, I know she would want nobody to be hurting like she did, and that she would want us to wear masks. So we are going to put the story here in this comment link down below so y'all can watch it, and you can watch the press conference there. You can read up about it as well, but we're just recapping for you. So we talked about masks. We talked about how that is something the governor and Dr. Scott Harris were really encouraging. Something else that came from this press conference was that Dr. Scott Harris said that by the end of business today, so assuming that's 5 p.m. today, there will be a color-coded map to come out on the Alabama Department of Public Health website. And that map, he said, will be color-coded from, I believe he said, green, yellow, and maybe orange. And that will allow people to see the case number per was it 7-day average, Mike, per county and per area?
I don't remember if it was 7 or 14, but it will show the counties where the counties that the cases have been going down over a 7 or 14-day period will have one color, and the counties where the cases have been going up, I think, will be in red, I think is what he said. He noted that Montgomery, which has been a real hot spot, cases are going down here. So he said Montgomery would actually be a green, which is surprising and good news for Montgomery.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think it was 14 days. I think I was wrong. You're right there. Carrie asks, and this is a good question, and I also have the same question. So maybe, Mike, you can answer this. Is that color-coded map by county or is it by city?
It's by county.
Okay. So, Carrie, that will be by county. And we are expecting that to be available on the Alabama Department of Health website by 5 p.m. today, or close of business today. Again, people asking about the masks. There is no statewide mask ordinance right now. You've got one in Jefferson County and you've got one in a couple other cities, but there's not a statewide mask ordinance. Now, was there anything talked about the beaches in this press conference today, Mike? I know some people speculated that there could be changes coming to the beaches.
Nothing changes about the beaches. Nothing changes about anything as far as I could tell, except, just a fresh emphasis, except extending the order and a fresh emphasis on following these requirements or these guidelines.
Something else that I thought was interesting, and this was from the Greenville mayor, Dexter McClendon. He said that he has a lot of people come up to him and say, well, I can't wait until this is over. And I'm sure that is something that all of us have been guilty of saying. I know I've said it. And he said, quote, it's up to you to make it over. And that was, again, a statement he was making about wearing masks, following social distancing, and different guidelines that the state and that the health officers have recommended for people to do.
Yeah. A point that Dexter Grimsley, the state rep, made was that he started out by saying, we'll be debating whether or not we did the right things, whether or not the state officials made the right decisions. We'll be debating that for years, but he said the things we do know is that wearing masks is better than not wearing masks. And he says we need to stick with the things we do know and make sure we do those and take care of it on that end. So I thought that was a good point.
I thought that was I'm glad you said that, Mike, because I wrote that down somewhere in this furious note taking over here. I wrote that down, but that was a great quote from the representative, and he made a good point. there was something else that I thought was interesting that we all know today's the 30th, the last day of June. July 4th is coming up, whether you call it July 4th, Independence Day. It's here on Saturday. And we know that that is a holiday where a lot of people get together in gatherings across the country. And we know people like to spend that holiday outdoors, watching fireworks, having cookouts, things like that, and oftentimes in big groups. So Mike, can you tell us a little bit? I know the governor made several comments about how, hey, I love July 4th, but we got to be careful.
Right. Yeah, I think the point is we can celebrate the 4th of July, but just do it in a smart way within our families, and if you're around people from other households, follow the social distancing guidelines, wear the masks at the appropriate times, and let's try not to have a surge in infection because of the July 4th events.
Right. Now, a lot of cities across the state have also canceled their fireworks celebrations as well. So if you were looking at that, if you were planning on watching those Saturday, make sure you check where you are if those are still going on. Now, why don't you, Mike, can you tell us again for people maybe who are just joining us, what this extension does and how long this extension goes and if anything changes?
The extension, the safer at home order was due to expire Friday. This extends it until for 4 weeks until July 28th, and otherwise it doesn't change anything. It is just an extension of the current order, which is, restaurants and bars can continue to be open. I guess that maybe was one of the things that people wondered about was bars, but that didn't change. Retail stores continued to be open with the 50% occupancy guidelines, and same with athletic clubs, entertainment venues. As I said, nothing changes. Nothing changed as far as what can be open and what can't be open.
Now, Queenie asks about the number of people that have recovered from coronavirus and the number of active cases. Queenie, I can look this up really fast, but that is, so there's over 30,000, I believe, cases right now of COVID. I don't have the number in front of me, but Scott Harris said over 30,000. And that number, at last check, there were over 15,000 who had recovered. I can pull it up for you really fast. Let's see. Mike, do you have anything else to add on that while I'm looking this up?
I don't. I'm sorry, I don't have that number. I know one thing Dr. Harris said that was important was that there are more people in the hospital now with COVID than there have been at any time during this pandemic.
That's a good point, Mike. I wrote that down. He said there were 750 people hospitalized statewide with coronavirus, and there are just 275 ICU beds remaining, and that is statewide. That's something the doctor said. Okay, I've got this in front of me. This dashboard that the Alabama Department of Public Health has provided for coronavirus. And Queenie, the answer to your question here is right now we've got, let's see, 37,536 confirmed cases and statewide recoveries. Now remember, this recovery number is only updated every week. It's not updated every day like the case number, but the presumed recoveries are 18,866. So not very good at math, but that is, again, that's another, let's see, 10. I'm very not good at math, but that's about half. We'll say that's about half of recovery. I can pull it up for you right here. But so that is that number again, 37,536 confirmed cases. And again, this number is updated weekly. The recoveries, it's nearly 19,000 recovered. It's 18,866 recovered. So hope that answers your question, Queenie, on that as well. Keep in mind that 37,000 number, that is a cumulative number. That's the amount of cases we've had since we started tracking them. That doesn't, they don't go in and deduct recoveries from that or anything like that. Now there's, let's see, I'm going through some of your comments. Coretta is asking about the ICU beds. Mike, can you give any insight to anything Scott Harris said about ICUs and hospitalizations across the state?
No insight beyond what we already said, that he said that, there's more hospitalizations now than there have been at any point during the pandemic, which obviously is a concern. He did not say that, the capacity is about to run out or anything, but he did give a number there on the number of ICU beds remaining. I think you just quoted that number, didn't you? I forgot what it was.
Yes, it was 275 ICU beds remaining.
And I don't know enough about it to know how critical that, how close to the edge that is, but obviously it's a concern, or Dr. Harris would not have mentioned it.
Right. Again, that's 750 hospitalized right now across the state, which, as Mike just said, has been, according to Scott Harris, that has been the highest hospitalization number that we've seen so far during the pandemic in Alabama. Now, again, we can talk a little bit about the Representative Dexter Grimsley and the Greenville Mayor Dexter McClendon's experiences. Now, you were there at the press conference and heard them in the flesh, and Representative Dexter Grimsley was talking about his sister who died of coronavirus earlier this year. And can you recap for us what he said about that experience?
He said his sister was 58 years old. She was a nurse for 20 years. And he said that, if she could communicate with him now, or could have communicated when she was suffering in the hospital, that she would have said, I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. And she said she's sure that would be her message to him now. The mayor, as we talked about earlier, said his wife, his mother, who's 90, this is Mayor McClendon of Greenville, his mother, who's 90 years old, is in her nursing home. I believe he said he hasn't seen her since March, but she had COVID and has recovered. And I believe he said she's tested negative twice. So that's an amazing story for her, for their family. And the mayor said that he and his wife both had it, and his wife had a worse case than he did. But apparently they have both recovered.
Right. And go ahead.
I was just saying he was just stressing the point. This is real, because it's happened to me and my family. So
we've got a question too about the number of deaths, and looking right now at the Alabama Department of Public Health information, there have been 926 confirmed coronavirus deaths. So I'm not sure who asked that in the comments. I'm sorry. I think I scrolled. Now I can't find the exact comment on it, but somebody asked 926 is the number of deaths we've seen in Alabama from COVID. Again, getting some comments about masks. There is not a statewide mask order. That was something some people saw maybe and started commenting and got that circulating before in those comments, but there is no statewide mask order at this time. Now, the governor and Dr. Scott Harris did offer very strong words on wearing a mask. Again, the governor said, quote, "For goodness sake, wear a mask." And she even said, look, we could order a statewide mask ordinance, but that doesn't mean people would follow it. And that does not mean that we could enforce it. So that was something that the governor and Dr. Scott Harris both said. But Dr. Scott Harris actually said it's everyone's responsibility and everybody should be wearing masks when they go out in public. Do you have anything to add on that, Mike? Anything I forgot?
No, except that, there's nothing that prevents cities or counties from I'm not sure about counties, but there's nothing prevents cities from enforcing a mask ordinance. They can't have that. They can't have anything less stringent than the statewide order, but there's nothing that prevents cities from having a mask ordinance.
Somebody talking about us not wearing masks. We are not together. We are actually several hours apart, Mike and I. So no, we're not wearing a mask while we're talking to each other. I'm alone in my house, and I think Mike is also alone. So if that answers your question there. Now somebody asked about. Yeah, good question. Like I said, we are nowhere near each other. We're not even in the mileage of each other. So somebody asking about bars, salons, things like that. Those are all still open. All of these places that have been open in the past several weeks are still open. This amended order doesn't change any of that, right, Mike?
Right. The amended order doesn't change anything except extend the time.
And again, when Mike was talking about the different the mask ordinances, now we've seen again some of these cities put in mask ordinances. Jefferson County, Mobile County are the two counties that have independent health authorities and could enforce and could enact a mask ordinance for their counties. Those are the only two. And Jefferson County has done that. Mobile County has not at the moment. So that does not. That's where we're at about the mask ordinance. There's a couple cities, including Birmingham, Montgomery, Selma, that have enacted those mask ordinances, but the only county right now is Jefferson. Did the governor or Scott Harris or anybody at that press conference, Mike, talk about the recovered number and talk about the recoveries?
I don't recall that subject coming up. It may have, and I'm sorry if it did. I don't recall what they said about that.
I do not believe that they did. We've got several people asking. I don't believe they did, other than, again, that information, that number is available online from the Alabama Department of Public Health, and that is over 18,000. So if you're looking for that information, you can go to the Alabama Department of Public Health dashboard, the dashboard for coronavirus, and that's 18,866 cases or people who have recovered from a case of coronavirus. So if we don't have any other questions regarding that, we will leave the link here to the story that contains the link to Mike's live stream of the governor's press conference that also includes all this information Mike and I have talked about today. So you can look there. If you have any questions, please let me or Mike know, and we will do our best to answer them. So thank you, Mike, so much for coming on and explaining this to us and breaking it down a little bit. Again, this amended Safer at Home order goes through July the 31st at 5. So towards the end of July, we will expect to hear something else from the governor, correct?
Right. Correct.
So we will
extend it for 4 weeks.
Got it. So this is the reality for 4 weeks, and we will see what happens toward the end of July, coming off of the July 4th holiday. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Mike, thank you for breaking this down. And for all of you watching, we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.